News. And I know last week I had a little bit of a spotty connection, and apparently the audio was kind of low. I don't know. I don't know. With my budget, I make $3 a month on this YouTube channel, if that. So I don't really have a lot in the budget to upgrade equipment. Would be nice, but sad to say. So I apologize for that if the audio is not um, up to the standards. I think it was worse on other devices, so it's just that's kind of how it works. The first story here: EVTN News, Eternal Vegano Television Network. Vegano. He was suspended from Twitter, but that was short-lived because he was reinstated. So I guess that story is kind of, well, it's not irrelevant, but I guess Twitter, I guess they realized that there was a problem and reinstated him. So there you go. I didn't even know he had a Twitter account until his account was, well, until it was suspended. I don't know. It was just recently when I found out he actually had a Twitter account just a few days ago. So that's interesting. And of course, he's trying to promote his canceled priests um, organization. Well, canceled religious, I guess, because the only initiative, as far as I know, is a group of nuns, traditional nuns. Now, I do want to, and if you haven't checked out last week's video, check it out. There's a ton of breaking stories, and I'm gonna not break, but I'm gonna discuss a little bit further some things that I neglected to discuss in last week's video. But last week's video talked about the synod, the um, the people that were appointed as voting members of the synod, and also the new group of cardinals. The Francis Church is moving really fast. So, but we do have there are still people with the faith. There are still people in the hierarchy that have the Catholic faith. I suspect that this bishop that I'm going to be talking about is Catholic, and you'll see why. On June 23rd, Bishop Joseph Obani Sagwe of Kakamega, Kenya, addressed students, parents, and teachers during the annual Diocesan Education Day, emphasizing the dignity of the human person and the family. He said there are now dangers in the world in ideologies, in political statements, and laws that have been put in place. They reduce a person from being a person. He challenged gender ideology, rejecting that it is a human right for a boy to declare that he is now a girl. He said the human right is what God created you to be. Also, he talked about communism. He said communism does not recognize individuals. Communism recognizes a community of utilitarian persons. He further cautioned that some places have tried to live the philosophy of communism by doing away with all useless people, or useless, or so they say. We'll get to communism in a little bit. And I actually remember last week there was a cardinal, newly named cardinal of Hong Kong. He's a communist sympathizer. We'll get some more on that later. Communism will be that'll be an interesting part of today's show. But a communist sympathizer, I would say he has a chance to be named the next pope. Bishop Stephen Chow of Hong Kong. He's not even really discussed in any of the articles I have today, but we'll move on. So last week or a few weeks ago, I talked about Vegano's new initiative. Now there's a different initiative. It's called Protect Our Priests, and you can read about this on LifeSite News, the full story, and I'll give you my thoughts on this. This is a non-profit Catholic organization. It has launched a new apostolate dedicated to connecting stable groups of Catholics across the United States with priests willing to provide for their spiritual needs. Engineer James Michael Francis Komenecki, the president and CEO of Protect Our Priests, said There are currently more than 300 diocesan traditional Latin Mass locations in danger of being canceled by bishops. The organization is currently working with Catholics in Maryland, Illinois, and South Dakota to set up private chapels together with priests to serve the faithful. The key word is private chapels. He said, we have received canonical counsel from canon lawyers that such arrangements could be set up on an emergency basis, similar to the highest good and salvation of souls canonical argument used by the SSPX. The traditional Latin Masses and locations will not be publicly promoted with the common time or location. This effort is underway as a response to the spiritual crisis triggered by Traditionis Custodes. So the key words here are private chapels. It's going to be a bunch of private masses, and these groups are going to fund traditional priests. Now, people have discussed problems with this strategy because the SSPX does have a hierarchy, and there is accountability at the SSPX, whereas if you have these independent private chapels, there is no accountability and there's no oversight. So it could cause problems theologically. Who are their spiritual directors? You know, I guess that's a real question. And it's nice to get priests to Latin masses, but I don't know. I think it's better that the faithful find priests themselves, but I mean, we are in a crisis. We are absolutely in a crisis. And things that were unjustifiable prior to Vatican II, you can now discuss these things. I mean, at least we're having the discussion. So, if you have any thoughts on that, leave your thoughts in the comments about what you think about these priests, this organization, and the positives and negatives. If you have any thoughts on that, I don't know. We'll see how far the Synod goes, because at a certain point, I would say, if it gets to a certain point, then licit masses, or so-called licit masses, will mostly be invalid. That's not, I don't know. That's not true, or is that not right? I don't know. But the masses that are approved by bishops will mostly be invalid, is what I'm going to say, if some of these synodal goals become accomplished. We'll cross that bridge later when we come to it. Not in this program. We'll cross it in several months, possibly, maybe a few years. I don't know. Hopefully never, but you just don't know. I talked a lot about the Synod on Synodality last week, but I forgot to mention a really significant person. Bishop Georg Batzing will be a voting member of the Synod. He is the president of the German Bishops' Conference. Also, his friend, Bishop Franz Joseph Overbeck, who is equally as heretical. They were selected as the German Bishops' Conference representatives. They were not selected by Pope Francis. They were voted by the German Bishops' Conference, because the Bishops' Conferences selected representatives, and then Pope Francis handpicked. And mostly, at least in the United States, the bishops that were selected by the USCCB were far less radical than the ones selected by Pope Francis. In fact, it seems like the ones that have the most heretical beliefs have the least popularity at the USCCB, but that's just my perception on that. But nonetheless, Batzing will be there, and he will be voting, and I'm sure he will speak, as well as his friend Overbeck, who has heretical beliefs as well. So I neglected to mention that, I think, in the last week's video, but that's a huge addition to what I had to say. So keep that in mind, as well as all of the other crazy people. And I'll even talk a little bit more later about another person selected to the synod who I did mention last week, but there's more information on that. But first, we're targeted by the FBI. And I don't know. Hopefully that doesn't get me demonetized. But the FBI responded on Friday, July 7th to a lawsuit filed by an advocacy group and claimed that the group is not entitled to records regarding the agency's targeting of Catholics in a memo from January, according to documents obtained by the Daily Caller News Foundation. So Catholic Vote was the one that filed the lawsuit in April against the agency after it failed to respond to the Freedom of Information Act request regarding the FBI's targeting of Catholics. The FBI was forced in February to retract a memo that showed that the FBI's field office in Richmond was considering infiltrating groups of Roman Catholics who prefer the Latin Mass, and noted the FBI's concerns that racially motivated violent extremists could use traditional Catholic parishes and social media accounts as facilitation platforms to promote violence. Well, you know what also is used to promote violence? Women's marches, abortion clinics, college campuses. But it's not the type of violence that they're opposed to. They only oppose violence on one political spectrum. And these communists, yes, they are communists, they consider violence, they consider things like, as violence, that are things like hate speech or thought crimes, wrongthink. They consider that violence. So take that as you will. The FBI is a bunch of communists. And I don't know, maybe I'll be kicked off for that. I do have a Rumble account. Go ahead and find me. I have some pretty unfiltered ideas there. John the Son of Thunder. Take a look, see what you think. It's no buzzwords used there. It's all straight talk. Okay, Francis Cardinal. Archbishop Stephen Ameyu Martin Mola of Juba, South Sudan, was named a cardinal just in the last batch of cardinals last week. In 2019, a concerned group of people of Juba gave 3 reasons for opposing the appointment as Archbishop of Juba, charging that government officials and some Juba priests had conspired to promote Ameyu as Archbishop for personal interest and had influenced a Vatican diplomat to that end, that a local priest could have been appointed, and alleging that Ameyu has fathered at least 6 children. I don't know if it's true, but it wouldn't be the first time. And this is South Sudan. So who knows? Maybe these are just disgruntled people making stuff up. But maybe it's true. And we don't know. And in the Francis Church, we might not find out for a while. All right, getting back to the synodalist. So, a woman from Minnesota is a voting member. Cynthia Bailey Mans was announced on July 7th to be one of the 10 non-bishop voting delegates chosen to represent the North American region at the first General Assembly of the Synod on synodality in October. The appointments mark the first time in history that anyone other than bishops have been permitted to vote in a synod. On Thursday, complicit clergy highlighted video footage showing that the church where Mans currently serves as adult learning director, St. Joan of Arc in Minneapolis, is profoundly heterodox and hosts blasphemous talks and events. The church hosts a pre-mass speaker series during which testimonies have been given by LMNOPs on multiple occasions. And it's not just I'm living out my call to celibacy. No, it's promoting, endorsing LMNOP activity. In a video clip shared by a complicit clergy, church pastor Father Jim DeBruckier suggested um, he suggested that the Vatican is well aware of the church's theological leanings, sharing his announcement of her appointment that it came after a lot of vetting of Cynthia, including where she works. Mans went on to confirm, in order to vet me, they had to vet St. Joan of Arc, and for those who say we aren't Catholic enough, blah, 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 yeah, we are. And the Pope said so, she concluded, laughing. According to Mans, Archbishop Bernard Hebda of the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, nominated her as a voting delegate in the Synod on Synodality. So any illusions anyone had about Hebda being Catholic, throw that out the window. This woman serves as an adjunct professor at United Theological Seminary, an ecumenical school that embraces all denominations and faith traditions and describes itself as theologically adventurous. The seminary endorses anti-life ideas, LMNOP endorsements, and held a pagan spring equinox chapel service. The Catholic Spirit, it's a publication. It has named Mans as a contributor. The Catholic Spirit. I'm not sure what that is. But anyway, the Catholic Spirit has named Mans as a contributor to the heretical bi-monthly journal called Ecumenical Trends, which advocates with shared communion with Protestants. As Hebda has noted, as Archbishop Hebda has noted in a written announcement of her appointment as voting delegate for the Synod, Mans represented the Archdiocese at his request on a group that worked with the World Council of Churches and the Dicastery for the Promotion of Christian Unity to draft the international materials for the 2023 Week of Prayer for Christian Unity. So she goes to a heretical church that is fully permitted by Archbishop Hebda. She's part of these ecumenical groups, anti-Catholic, and clearly goes against all Catholic doctrine. And Hebda has promoted her in the past. So what does that say about Hebda? It says that he's fine with these heresies. And so he's complicit in this rotten synod. And I don't think there's any argument against that. Look, if you're not basically what? If you're not against us, then you're for us, but these people are against us. If you're against the Catholic faith, I'm opposed to those I'm opposed to those who are opposed to the Catholic faith. Does it make you Catholic to support anti-Catholic ideas? And especially an archbishop. This is ridiculous. This is where we're at. All right. So, communist bishop. I mean, not that, there's people like McElroy and Supich, I'm sure they're, I don't know, when you say communist bishop, but they're not official communist bishops, like this one. Bishop Joseph Shen Bin was installed in Shanghai in April in violation of the Holy See's provisional agreement with Beijing on the appointment of bishops. It was the second unauthorized appointment by Chinese authorities in the past year. So President Xi, or whoever was part of his cabinet or whatever, appointed this bishop to supposedly the Chinese above-ground Catholic Church. It's a patriotic church. It's country first, then throw in some religious ideas. Pope Francis formally confirmed Shen Bin for the Shanghai Post on July 15th, just this past Saturday. Cardinal Parolin said that the Vatican intentionally made the decision to take time before publicly commenting on the case to evaluate the pastoral situation in Shanghai, which has been without a bishop for over a decade. Parolin underlined that it is indispensable that all episcopal appointments in China, including transfers, be made by consensus as agreed, and keeping alive the spirit of dialogue between the Holy See and China. Is it really dialogue? Although, does the Vatican agree with communism? I think that's a fair question to ask. And that is a yes or no question. I have a feeling that it's one way more than the other. Okay. What do you think about that? All right, so I linked an article. It was an interview posted, well, Arate Chele posted this interview with Kissy Fernandez, newly appointed dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, the head of the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, and also named Cardinal. This interview appeared in Spanish at catalin.com, and so they translated it. And they ask heretical questions, or questions from a heretical perspective, like does the deeper understanding of doctrine also mean overcoming LMNOP as objectively disordered, a definition in the Catechism that continues to hurt those who live in an unchosen sexual condition and also their families. Kissy said, this is a problem of the theological language, which sometimes ignores the effect it can have on people's hearts, as if it were indifferent to the pain it produces. But as you know, this is not the case with Pope Francis, who would certainly use different language. So they're going to change the Catechism whenever it says objectively disordered in regards to LMNOPs. That language will be changed. Okay. But are you surprised? Are you really surprised? Cardinal Tobin said he wanted to change it long ago. I think people sometimes forget certain things like that, but there are definitely facts. They're a not so quiet group of people who want to change it, and they just so happen to be associated with McCarrick. Nighty night, baby. Blessing LMNOP. Here's a question. Blessing LMNOP couples is a sacrilege for traditionalist circles. See, they're heretics that are asking these questions. Do they quote the Bible with full knowledge of the facts? Well, the answer to that is yes, but let's see what Kissy says. He doesn't. Oh, and I don't see yes anywhere in his response. He says, they are biblical texts that should not be interpreted in a material way. I don't want to say literal. The Church has long understood the need for a hermeneutic that interprets them in their historical context. This does not mean they would lose their content, but that they should not be taken completely literally. Otherwise, this is a real insult. Otherwise, they would have to obey St. Paul's command for women to cover their heads, for example. And I say to that, well, if you answered the question in a Catholic way, you would also understand that St. Paul's command for women to cover their heads, it's not an anti-Catholic idea. In fact, it's very Catholic, and by disregarding it, anyway. One of the questions, and what do you feel like saying to Catholics disappointed by the stagnation of reflection on women's access to the diaconate, even if it is permanent, despite a couple of ad hoc commissions set up by the Pope? Kissy says, I say that it will not do us any good to analyze this problem in isolation. What lies behind it, and is much deeper, is the discourse on power in the Church and women's access to places where there is decision-making power. That is why it is important that women begin to vote in the Synod. So more or less, Pope Francis doesn't always pick the most brilliant guys. More or less, this basically says, we're taking it slow, and that's the goal, is women deacons, but right now, we're going to start with having women vote in the Synod. I mean, it can't be any more clear than that. Question: does the possible ordination of married men defended by a large majority in the Synod on Amazonia, huh, well, they're heretics and morons. They don't understand basic ideas because it wasn't defended by a large majority. It was, in fact, opposed by a large majority. But they try to make it seem that way. That's how they make it appear. That's typical modernist tactics. You really shouldn't even give an interview with these people based on their questions. But Kissy embraces it, I'm sure. Amazon. Okay. Defended by a large majority in the Synod on Amazonia. Does the possible ordination of married men undermine doctrine, or is it a possible hypothesis for the Church? Kissy says it is a possible hypothesis, as in fact happens in the East, but it is a prudential decision that the Pope must weigh. Which means it's going to happen. There will be married men. It will be permissible for married men to be ordained to the priesthood. Now, current men, like men who are currently not married, might be very angry about that. So we'll see what happens. But I think definitively this ordination of married men to the priesthood is discipline. But I think we will see, ordination. Celibacy is a discipline in the Roman Church. But I think we'll see this overturned by the modernists very soon. The next year or two. And you can bookmark that. Bookmark this spot in the video and call me back in 2 years and see what's up. In fact, the Vatican already issues dispensations for married men to be ordained, and it happens a lot in the ordinariate, in the Anglican ordinariate. The question is, what do you expect from the October Synod of Bishops? And Kissy says, unlike other synods where I expected very concrete answers, in this case I prefer to wait and see where the Spirit wants to lead us. Well, there will be a Spirit leading you, and it won't be the Holy Spirit because it wasn't invited. But also, does the Holy Ghost, does it work in people who are heretics? I don't know. I think it's possible if you're truly seeking conversion, if you're a heretic but you're truly seeking the truth. Truly seeking the truth. Wow. Pardon that English. If you're seeking the truth, and the Holy Ghost may inspire you, I don't know. But these guys, I don't think they're looking for the Holy Ghost to inspire them. I think they're looking for something unholy to inspire them, and it already has. And just really the insults against the traditionalists in this interview are unbelievable. And otherwise we'd have to obey St. Paul's command for women to cover their heads, for example. He's a real jerk. Come on. You can't say anything else about that. It says, here's a question. Have you been marked by the invectives, also on a personal level, that have been addressed to you from traditionalist circles? So really, they're trying to paint, they're failing, but they try to paint anyone who opposes Kissy as a radical, right-wing traditionalist, alt-right, racist, homophobic, and he says, I expected them, but they are not what worries me most. That's too bad. There are other areas in which operations are carried out to damage the image of people when they do not respond to their ideological and economic interests. In those cases, the social message of Francis Brothers. They are not precisely traditionalist sectors. I don't know what he means there. Maybe it's Franciscans that are modernist heretics. Not all, and that's not saying all Franciscans are heretics, but there are some, and some are very radical. In fact, possibly even worse than the Jesuits. And I actually question anyone who joins these religious orders that are heavily endorsing LMNOP. I just wonder if that's a requirement to join. Wow, lots of comments. Thanks for joining me on the live stream. USDCB is primarily neoconservative Novus Ordo. Sure. I'm one of those people that has been going after for years. Did you get your hat on Etsy or Amazon? Amazon. But you can find them if you're willing to pay enough. Just go to Google Shopping. Is that what it is? And you can find them. It's not cheap. Radicals don't even do political violence. They want to blame our non-crimes on trad Caths, which is simply preposterous. Yeah, I agreed. I don't think China is a communist state anymore. It's National Socialist authoritarian government with a mixed economy. Well, I don't know. Yeah. The Washington regime is much more communist and leftist than the government in Beijing. Well, I've actually been hearing that, how it's less communist, but yeah, totalitarian type of, but it's basically, it's still like a government worship type of thing. I mean, I know that's what the U.S. wants, and in China it sort of works. Maybe in Utah it would work. There are enough Catholic priests in Utah. You might want to let the SSPX know that. Would that in Utah, is that in regards to the private masses? I don't know about. I know for a fact the SSPX are very slow in opening up new chapels because they just don't have enough priests to staff it, and they don't want to overburden themselves. I mean, you can have. Actually, I heard there was now this is actually diocesan, but there's a priest in Maine who says a Latin Mass at noon on Sundays, and then he's actually a Byzantine priest though, so he says a divine liturgy in one place on Saturday, and then a divine liturgy on Sunday. He has to drive 3 hours from where he says the Latin Mass. So even like diocesan priests can be stretched out. Did you see the recent complicit clergy video on the lay people they appointed to the synod? It was astonishing, the stuff they were promoting. No, I didn't, but I wonder if the article I have linked in the description would take you to that video. I'm interested to know. I'm sure that it has nothing to do with being Catholic. Okay. Don't forget to hit the like button. Well, thanks. China is atheistic communists. Married men. Oh, Utah would work for married men. I don't think it would work anywhere for married men, to be honest, but because it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. And it works fine for like the traditionalist orders like FSSP, SSPX, and Institute. They don't have married men, and they're doing fine. So, I mean, we don't need married men in the priesthood. I know that there are some that are good priests, but that doesn't mean that we need married men in the priesthood. I think that definitely celibacy is definitely important. So we shouldn't do that. Now this is it's not really been communist since Mao died and his loyalists lost power. The communist bits are mostly aesthetic. That's interesting. I don't know that I have time to discuss that. I know that China does have like a communist stigma, I guess you would say. You know, either way, they're atheistic. It's atheistic government worship, in a sense. Um, and you know, with the persecution of the Catholic priests, and you hear about the government torture. At least that doesn't go on in the United States. However, it seems like quite a few bishops um, would mostly comply with anything the government says, and some of them actually endorse that kind of stuff and oppose the Catholic faith in the United States. And you know that because you've been watching this channel, and that's what I'm talking about and pointing it out. So, all right, well, this has been EVTN News. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. We are the laity, and we will not be silent. Oh, it's communist in China because they bulldoze churches, they destroy crucifixes, they kill people, make them disappear. That's the kind of stuff communists do. Agreed, that's the tactics. I think it's kind of just a debate over what technically the government is, but it's not Catholic, and I think we can all agree that it's anti-Catholic. We can label it certain ways and you know, categories and subcategories, but at the end of the day, it's not Catholic. They persecute Catholics. They have the one-child policy, which is anti-Catholic, and very much so the current resident and his handlers. The current resident of the White House and his handlers, they do they oppose Catholicism more than the Chinese government? Chinese Communist Party. Yes. Yes, for sure. I don't know. It's I think it's a matter of labeling. It doesn't matter. It's all anti-Catholic. And any kind of association with communism, socialism, whatever, is anti-Catholic. It's been condemned by multiple popes. But anyway, I don't spend a lot of time paying attention to politics. The political ideas I talk about here, that's pretty much the political exposure I get all week, because you know I was a much more pleasant person when I stopped paying attention to Facebook and the political posts, and now I'm a much more pleasant person, although you couldn't tell whenever I'm talking about this awful news that I usually talk about here. Anyway, do you think... Oh, wow, thanks for joining. Do you think that a schism will come from this synod? Too early to tell. Yeah, too early to tell. I don't know. Because we could always have a new pope, and then who would cancel the synod. So that's my thought on that. But if it's a schism, the mainstream church would be in schism from the Catholic faith, which is I don't know how that would even work, but it would, and maybe they already are. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we are the laity, and we will not be silent.